Imagine for a moment living in a society where every political decision, every choice of who should govern, was not guided by personal interests, manipulation, or the pursuit of power, but by wisdom. A society where justice was not merely the cold enforcement of laws, but the expression of a deeper order that aligns the individual with themselves and with the whole. This is the bold dream Plato presents to us in his most famous work, The Republic. Written around 380 BC in Athens, this work emerges in the midst of a crisis. Athenian democracy had been shaken by the Peloponnesian War, by political corruption, and above all, by the unjust condemnation of Socrates, Plato's teacher, to death. The philosopher, outraged by the moral and political decay of his city, embarked on a monumental project to rethink from the ground up what justice is, what role education plays, who should govern, and even how we should understand the human soul. But the Republic is not just a political treatise. It is also a profound reflection on the human condition, on what it means to live well, on the dangers of illusions, and on the necessity of philosophy as liberation. It is in this book that metaphors arose which have endured for centuries, such as the Allegory of the Cave, the Ring of Gyes, and the philosopher's journey in search of the good. Today, diving into this dialogue is like looking into a mirror of our own society, challenging, chaotic, often unjust, but still in search of a greater horizon. Before we dive into Plato's work, hit like, share this video with someone seeking deep reflections, and leave a comment about what you know or want to learn about the Republic. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Each video is a chance to see the world differently. Book I. The starting point. What is justice? The Republic begins in the form of a dialogue, with Socrates as the guide of this journey. He is not the one who provides ready-made answers, but the one who provokes, questions, and leads his interlocutors to see beyond the surface. It is as if Plato had placed his master on stage to represent philosophy itself in action, restless, ironic, but always in search of truth. The setting is the house of Cephalus, an elderly man surrounded by his sons and friends. There, in the calm of everyday conversation, arises the question that will sustain the entire work. What is justice? Cephalus, with the serenity of old age, replies that to be just is to tell the truth and to pay one's debts. It seems simple, even noble. But Socrates soon exposes the cracks in this definition. What if returning a debt meant causing harm, such as giving back a weapon to someone who has gone mad? It is then that Polemarchus, Cephalus's son, takes the floor. For him, justice is helping friends and harming enemies, an intuitive, almost natural idea. But Socrates, with his sharp irony, turns the logic upside down. What if we mistake friends for wicked people or enemies for good ones? Wouldn't justice in that case become injustice? The atmosphere heats up when Thrasymachus, the sophist, enters the scene. With a firm voice, he makes a provocative claim. Justice is nothing more than the advantage of the stronger. For him, those who govern create laws for their own benefit, and the people call this justice. It is a harsh, almost cynical view, but one that still resonates today. A reflection. Doesn't this sound familiar? How often do we see power shaping the rules of the game for its own benefit, calling it order, law, or even justice? Socrates, however, is not intimidated. He shows that the true ruler must act like a doctor toward a patient, not thinking of himself, but of the well-being of those under his care. Thus ends the first book, without a definitive answer, but with the certainty that justice is deeper than social conventions or interests of power. Plato invites us to continue the search, for true philosophy begins when we realize that we do not yet know enough. Book 2. The Challenge of Glaucon and Adeimantus. The dialogue advances. Thrasymachus, irritated, has already fallen silent, but the question remains unresolved. It is then that two voices arise to change the course of the conversation. Glaucon and Adeimantus, Plato's brothers, they are not satisfied. They want more. Glaucon challenges Socrates to prove that justice is valuable in itself, not merely for the rewards it may bring. And to do so, he introduces a story that still echoes today. The myth of the ring of Gyges. Imagine a simple shepherd who finds a magical ring. By turning it, he becomes invisible. Now ask yourself, if no one could see him or punish him, would he still act justly? Glaucon bets not. That when faced with impunity, any man would give in to the temptation of power and pleasure. A reflection. And you, what would you do if you had a ring of Gyges today? Would you remain just, or would you use invisibility to act without limits? Adeimantus reinforces the critique. From an early age, people learn that being just is worthwhile because it brings rewards, fame, riches, favors from the gods. But what if none of that existed? What if justice were only a burden with no prizes or applause? Who would still choose it? Socrates accepts the challenge, but he warns. To answer, it is not enough to look only at the individual. The view must be broadened. Just as a small letter is easier to read when written in larger size, justice in a man can be better understood when observed in an entire city. From this point on, the search for justice transforms into a monumental project to imagine the ideal city, which will serve as a mirror of the human soul. Book 3, The Formation of the Guardians. For a city to exist, it needs defenders, but who should occupy this role? Socrates begins to outline the education of the guardians, those who will protect the city with courage and loyalty. The first task is to care for the soul. Poetry, myths, and the stories young people hear shape their character. For this reason, Socrates proposes rejecting narratives in which gods are violent or unjust, because such tales would corrupt the vision of the good and of virtue. Education should inspire greatness, not trivialize vice. A reflection. Do you notice how Plato already intuited the power of narratives? Just as today, where series, films, and social media shape values and beliefs, in ancient Greece, myths played that very same role. But shaping the soul is not enough. The body must also be cared for. Gymnastics and music, discipline and beauty. Socrates insists that balance is essential. Gymnastics without music breeds brutality. Music without gymnastics produces weakness. The true guardian must be both strong and sensitive. In addition, the selection of guardians must be rigorous. They cannot be chosen merely for strength, but for their love of wisdom, their willingness to serve, and their refusal to seek personal advantage. A guardian must be like a loyal watchdog, fierce against enemies, yet gentle and protective with those he loves. Thus begins to emerge a special class of citizens who do not live for themselves, but for the city. A moral and educational elite, forged for the common good. Book 4, The Discovery of Justice. With the city structured, Socrates takes the next step, identifying the virtues that sustain it. First, wisdom present in the rulers, who must know what is best for everyone. Then, courage found in the guardians, steadfast in defending the city. The third virtue is moderation, when all classes, rulers, guardians, and workers, accept their role and maintain harmony. And finally, the long-awaited answer emerges: justice. For Plato, being just means that each person fulfills their function without interfering in others' roles. In the city, this means order and balance. In the individual, it means that each part of the soul, reason, spirit, and desire, acts in harmony. A reflection. Isn't it curious how this definition seems to dialogue with our modern dilemmas? Often, injustice arises precisely from disorder, when greed dominates reason or when rulers pursue their own interests instead of the common good. This is Plato's first great synthesis. The just city is a reflection of the just soul. Justice is not merely a convention or obedience to laws. It is an inner order, a balance among the forces that inhabit us and that also sustain life in society. And it is precisely this vision that paves the way for Plato's boldest proposals, which will emerge in the following books. Book 5, The City of Philosophers. The dialogue reaches a surprising point here. Glaucon, curious, asks Socrates to explain more clearly how the city could become truly just. And it is at this moment that Plato's boldest proposals emerge. First, Socrates argues that men and women should receive the same education. In the 4th century BC, this sounds almost unthinkable. For him, if both possess the same nature as guardians, both must be trained equally in gymnastics, music, and philosophy. Sex should not be a criterion for exclusion in the service of the city. But the boldness does not stop there. Socrates proposes that among the guardians, families should be communal. Sons and daughters will not have individually known parents, but will be raised collectively, so that all serve the city rather than private interests. The idea is radical. If we eliminate private property and exclusive blood ties, we will also eliminate the conflicts of interest that corrupt politics. A reflection. Does this seem absurd? Perhaps. But what Plato seeks here is not a practical recipe, but a provocation. To what extent does attachment to power, money, and one's personal family prevent the construction of a truly just city? It is in this book that Plato's most famous statement also appears. Until philosophers rule as kings, or those who are now called kings and rulers truly become philosophers, there will be no end to the ills of humanity. With this, the ideal city is defined. Only the philosopher kings, those who love truth and contemplate the good, are capable of governing justly. Book 6, The Nature of the Philosopher. But who, after all, is this philosopher who should govern? Socrates begins by describing his qualities: love of knowledge, pursuit of truth, disdain for luxury, and for power for the sake of power. The philosopher is the one who is not satisfied with appearances, but desires to know the essence of things. To illustrate, Socrates uses the metaphor of the ship. Imagine a vessel where the sailors fight for command, each claiming authority without really knowing how to navigate. Meanwhile, the true pilot, who knows the stars, the winds, and the sea, is seen as useless or eccentric. For Plato, this pilot is the philosopher, and the quarrelsome sailors represent ordinary politicians who compete for power without wisdom. A reflection. Doesn't this seem like a timeless metaphor? How many times do we see leaders struggling for the helm of a country without truly understanding how to guide it? The philosopher, therefore, does not seek to govern out of vanity. He governs because he is the only one capable of contemplating the good in itself, that which stands above all things. And it is this vision that allows him to lead the city with justice. Socrates emphasizes that although the people distrust philosophers, only they can distinguish truth from shadows, essence from appearance. The city will be just only when it is guided by this wisdom. Book 6, The Allegory of the Cave. Here Plato gives us one of the most powerful images in the history of philosophy, the allegory of the cave. Imagine men chained inside a cave from birth. Behind them there is a fire. Between the fire and the prisoners, objects pass that cast shadows on the wall. The men, knowing no other reality, believe that the shadows are all that exists. But one of them is freed. At first the light blinds him, and he struggles to accept that what he saw before was only illusion. Gradually he leaves the cave, contemplates the real world, and finally looks at the sun, a symbol of the good, the source of all truth and reality. A reflection. How many times, trapped in our own caves, prejudices, illusions, superficial opinions, do we mistake shadows for reality? The philosopher is the one who, freed from the chains, contemplates the truth. But Plato adds an essential point. This philosopher should not remain in the illuminated world only for himself. He has the duty to return to the cave and help others free themselves, even at the risk of being rejected or opposed. This is perhaps the most beautiful synthesis of the role of philosophy for Plato, not an escape from reality, but a mission to transform life in common. Book 8. The Corrupted Forms of Government. After presenting the ideal city, Socrates takes a bold step, showing how real regimes degenerate. Plato outlines a sequence of political decay as if it were a descending ladder. It all begins with aristocracy, the government of the best, the philosophers. But when the guardians fail to choose truly wise rulers, democracy arises, a society guided by honor and military strength. Men begin to value prestige and glory more than truth. From democracy, corruption advances to oligarchy. Now wealth governs. A few rich control the city, and the poor majority lives marginalized. The social contrast generates conflicts and resentment. A reflection. Do you notice how this description could appear in today's news? Concentration of wealth in the hands of few, growing inequality, social tensions. Plato was already outlining this scenario 2,400 years ago. From oligarchy emerges democracy. The people, tired of being oppressed, seize power. Unrestricted freedom arises. Everyone lives as they wish, without rigid hierarchies. Diversity flourishes, but so does excess. The problem, according to Plato, is that when everyone considers themselves equal in everything, order is lost. And from this unrestrained freedom emerges the worst form of government, tyranny. Amid the chaos, a charismatic leader appears, promising to defend the people. At first he seems like a protector, but soon becomes a tyrant, ruling through fear and violence. Plato describes this decline as inevitable if the city is not founded on true justice. Book 9, The Soul of the Tyrant. Now Socrates deepens the analysis, showing how political regimes reflect the human soul. Just as the just city reflects the just soul, political tyranny arises from inner tyranny. The tyrannical man is a slave to his own desires. He knows no limits. He seeks pleasures at any cost, driven by greed and lust. He lives at war with himself, divided among impulses that are never satisfied. A reflection. Have you noticed how Plato anticipates something we would today call vice? Whoever is dominated by desires finds no peace, only an insatiable appetite. In contrast, Socrates describes the life of the just man, someone who lives in harmony, because reason governs spirit and desire. This man is not a slave to immediate pleasure, but finds joy in inner balance. For Plato, justice is not only better for the city, but also for each person. The just live with serenity, the unjust live in torment. Book X, Art, Soul, and Immortality. In the final book, Plato returns to a delicate theme, the role of art and poetry. He argues that imitative art, such as epic poetry or tragedy, leads people away from the truth. The poet, Plato says, does not reveal the essence, but only a copy of a copy. Therefore, the poet must be treated with caution in the ideal city. But the final reflection is even deeper. Socrates presents the myth of a narrative about life after death. A warrior killed in battle, returns to life to tell what he saw in the beyond. Souls, after death, are judged and receive rewards or punishments. Then, they choose a new destiny to reincarnate. Some, blinded by ambition, choose lives of power and wealth. Others, wiser, seek simple and just lives. A reflection. Plato does not describe this myth as a literal truth, but as a powerful image to show that our choices shape not only this life, but the direction of our entire existence. The myth closes the work with a clear message. Being just is worthwhile not only for social order, but because justice harmonizes the soul and connects it to the good. Conclusion: the relevance of Plato. Today, upon finishing the Republic, we realize that Plato did not write only about Athens of his time. He wrote about eternal dilemmas, power, corruption, the role of education, the pursuit of truth. His vision may seem utopian, but his goal was not to depict a city that could exist exactly as described, but to provoke us. What is a just life? What is a just city? From the allegory of the cave to the portrait of tyranny, Plato invites us to look beyond the shadows and question whether we truly live in freedom or are merely trapped in illusions. If this reflection resonated with you, leave a comment about what touched or challenged you the most. Your perspective can inspire others as well. Now, if this video stirred something in you, like it and share it with someone who also needs to reflect. If you want to continue this journey with us, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Until the next video, bye.